Hello, everyone. Chip Paul here for Chip Talks Health. Today, we're going to explore kind of a fun concept. What does it mean to be alive? That's pretty cool. So, we're going to dive into this a little bit more deeply because I think it's something that, potentially might help wake some of you up to some of the things that we're seeing here at True Medics, Neighborly Wellness, New Medics, our, let's say, infrastructure and what we're learning about human health, which is quite exciting and also really enlightening and really interesting. So, I'm going to explore a topic with you today. One thing that you can do is I'm going to let's do this right now. So, learn pneumatics. Sorry to do this live, but we'll do this right here. So if you go to learn.pneumatics.com, you're going to find this white paper that I'm going to discuss today. You'll also find an increasingly growing amount of white papers. So there's not a lot of them out there now, but there will be a lot of them out there because I've written a lot of white papers and I want to put them out there. So I'll start putting them out there, but go to, if you're interested in this stuff, go to learn.pneumatics.com, sign up. I'm going to get your email address, but that's about all I need from you. So sign up and we'll give you access to these. And also, if you're interested in what we're doing investment wise, there'll be some stuff out there about our investment offerings and kind of how we're growing as a company and all that kind of stuff. So if any of that's of interest to you, learn@pneumatics.com. But let's get into the topic of today because I wrote a white paper about this, so you can download this white paper if you want to read more. The white paper is pretty detailed and pretty scientific. It's also cited, so if you're concerned that Chip is coming up with woohoo, then you can go to that paper and you can see exactly where I'm, whose shoulders, let's say, I'm standing on when I'm telling you this stuff or putting together this stuff for you. So that paper's out there. So go sign up, download it, get it, and read it and review it. And if you're a scientist and you want to have a conversation about it, let's have a conversation about it. But here's the thinking and the theory, right? So you remember Princess Bride? You remember the movie Princess Bride? And you remember the main character, I can't remember his name now, Dread Pirate Roberts, or whatever his character name was on there. But remember when he was killed and he was almost nearly dead, but not dead, right? That's an interesting concept because that's the way really you work. And so if you look at a cell is not an on or off situation, alive or dead. A cell can be, and it's almost better to, and the concept that I'm kind of coming up with here is a dimmer switch, okay? So it's almost better to think of that dimmer switch being turned all the way down or all the way off, and that would be dead. And then that dimmer switch beginning to turn on, and somewhere in there, there'd be a line of now we're alive, but there's a lot of upside past that line. And so that's the thing that I really want to discuss today is the upside past that line and kind of where we are in that overall dimmer switch. So are we closer to off or are we closer to on in our daily life? And sadly, it turns out we're closer to off, but that's an easy thing to fix. And we'll talk about how we can fix that kind of at the end of this. But let's go through the concept. So we've all been driving down the road, let's say, and we've seen that, squirrel or that bunny or whatever that, gets hit by the side of the road. And it's a sad event. It usually, makes me sad when I see something, or a dog or a cat or something, but, it's been hit on the side of the road. And it might be on our way home, right? So we might drive by that every day. And as we're driving by it, it changes, right? If nobody comes by and picks up that carcass, and nothing eats it, that carcass is going to change, right? So it's going to go from something that was, let's say, bright and not dim and something that was alive to something that's in the process of decomposing. Well, how do bacteria and all of these things, let's say, of the earth know when to come decompose you? How do they know what that line is? And there is kind of a line in this dimmer switch. So let's say when cells fall below a certain line, that's going to call in bacteria. That's going to say, that's kind of a process of the earth that says, oh, this thing is no longer functioning. It is no longer alive. So we need to call in these processes that will decompose this thing. And thank goodness we have those processes. Otherwise, we'd have dead bodies everywhere, right? So we got to have ways to decompose matter. And so at some point, you begin to call in those things if you're in a state of dimming, let's say, and there's a line that we would call, let's say, alive or dead. So there is an on and off line. But what is that dimmer switch all about, and how does it work? I mean, that's a super interesting thing. So it turns out that that dimmer switch really works by how you're moving electrons through your body. Okay. So when we eat, we think of eating as nutrients, right? Well, what are nutrients? Well, ultimately, what you're after in everything that you put in your mouth is an electron. Electrons are what power mitochondria. Electrons are our ultimate source of energy. So the way that you move electrons from, let's say, that food consumption, breathing in and out, you're also pulling electrons in. You have some osmotic stuff going on with your skin. But as you pull electrons in you, the efficiency of how you deal with those electrons, let's say from acquisition all the way to use in mitochondria, is super important. And there's different steps in there. So you can leak, electrons, and you're not going to be, let's say, as bright as you could be. Anything that would cause, let's say, an electron not to get from acquisition to mitochondria would be dimming you, okay? Would be causing you to not be all that you can be. Okay. So what are those things? Well, again, it always comes back to the same old stuff. In order to get down the road, we got to have oil and gas, right? We know that for our car. We know that for our chainsaw. We know that for our weed eater. We know that for everything around us. We don't know that for this thing. No one gave me an operations manual for this thing I have to drive around every day. So how do we take care of this thing? Well, number one is essential nutrients, right? Without essential nutrients, damned ourselves just a little bit without those essential nutrients, okay? Those essential nutrients are part of the whole exercise of getting an electron inside of you and then ultimately getting that electron into a mitochondria. That's not as easy as you would think. So, like, what has the most electrons that we eat? Well, dietary fat, and in particular, polyunsaturated fatty acids and omega-3 and omega-6 in particular. But fats have the most electrons. So fats are really important to our body. Fats are where we get most of our juice, and fats are where we're getting most of those electrons. So how we deal with fats, how we strip those electrons is super duper duper important. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the white paper here because I'll probably refer to it a couple of times. But anyway, how we basically get those electrons is super duper important. So when we eat a fat, we're breaking down that fat, but we're stripping off those bonds. Well, we're moving the fat into mitochondria, and then the mitochondria will strip off those bonds and use those electrons. But in order to do that, it's not just a 1-2 process. There's a whole step down that has to happen. And in that step down, it's really important that we have amino acids, that we have proteins, and, peptides and proteins are built from amino acids, and they're built by cells. And so, we need to have those basically as signaling, but also those as step downs. We also use vitamins, trace minerals, and metals as step downs. Okay. So as ways to move electrons around where we're conserving energy as much as we possibly can, until they get to the mitochondria. And then we're allowing that full energy grab, energy expenditure. But, there's a lot of things that can go wrong, let's say. And so if you look at the very definition of disease, or, what dims the bulb. So let's talk about what dims the bulb. And the cool thing, I think, here is none of us are as bright as we can be. So none of us are none of us are eating our essential nutrients. I mean, you might be in the 0.0001% that even know what your essential nutrients are. Again, there's lots of videos and stuff I've done in the past about essential nutrients. So if you're curious, just go back and find one of those videos. But most of us don't even know. And so because we don't know, we're not practicing these things. So we've never seen, let's say, a human that has been fully functionally optimized around essential nutrients their entire life. So we don't even know what that upside should look like. What should it look like? That person should look like they're 30 to 35 all their life. They shouldn't visibly age, maybe a little bit, but not a lot, So there's some cool stuff that's coming as we get this figured out. Definitely some longevity stuff, definitely some quality of life stuff. We are definitely viewing disease in the wrong way, in the wrong framework. Most disease has to do with malnourishment, because we don't know what our essential nutrients are, and infection. So let's go through what dims the bulb. So the biggest thing that dims you and I's bulb is what we put in our maw every day. So what we eat is what determines our brightness or our dimness. And, if you don't eat, again, you're going to become so dim that you die, right? But dietary inputs are really what determine our overall brightness, our ability to defend ourselves, our ability to defend against infection. And infections will further dim our brightness. But again, infections are related to our luminosity. So at a really high luminosity, it's going to be really hard. It's not like you're never going to get infected, but it's going to be super duper hard to infect you. Your immune system is going to be, robust. It's going to be like little light warriors with, lightsabers and all that kind of stuff, right? Whereas right now we're have picks and shovels and toothpicks that we're trying to defend ourselves with. So nutrients and understanding essential nutrients and getting essential nutrients in us. By the way, I get asked this a lot. So, I'm 80 years old, let's say, and I've never taken my essential nutrients, and I'm infected with stuff, and I have chronic inflammation and all the things that we see in people that we look at in this way. So let's say you're in that boat. Can you get better? Yeah, absolutely. Again, cells get created all the time. You're in a constant process of renewing yourself. And so it's never, let's say, too late to start. And you can really turn over a lot of major cellular stuff in your body in 6 weeks. You can turn over a lot in 6 months. So this is something that you can turn around. And I don't care where you are. Let's say if you're almost, dimmed out. Again, there is probably a too far gone, but we can always increase that luminosity. Okay. So we can always kick up the volume. And what does kicking up the volume do? Let's say you have cancer. Again, how are you going to fight cancer with a dim bulb? Don't you want the brightest bulb possible? Absolutely. How are you going to fight an autoimmune? How are you going to fight diabetes? How are you going to fight obesity? How are you going to lose weight with a dim bulb? It's just not going to happen. Most weight gain has to do with fat storage, and that's a dysregulation in the endocannabinoid system, and that happens from chronic inflammation. So most of the obesity that we see some of it is poor diet, certainly, but it's really related more to kind of what goes on in that diet, what happens to that person, and basically how they're dimming their bulb. Then they get infected. That just makes them dim further, okay? So essential nutrients are the biggest brightness restorers. Again, this white paper, if you download it, it's cited. So it's, not just me telling you this. You've got people like Philip Calder, who's one of the most renowned lipid scientists in the world, also telling you the same things that I'm telling you. So this paper is well cited. So what are your essential nutrients? Just real quick. Again, you have to build membranes. In order to build membranes and cells, every single cell is built from dietary fat, from the fats that you eat. So we have to have omega-3 and omega-6 fats in balance. Those are essential nutrients. Your body won't make them. And that's the way we make and maintain cell walls. And that's also the way that we make them rigid or flexible, is with omega-3 and omega-6 fats. Right now, we overconsume omega-6 vastly. We underconsume omega-3, and that configures every cell inside of you, okay? So, and right now, we're all configured reactionary and inflammatory. And guess what? 80% of us are going to die of some inflammatory disease. Seems like we're missing something there, right? Essential nutrients. So, just supplementing with omega-3, so EPA and DHA, will change a lot of things about your life, but certainly change your reactivity and your inflammation level. The next category of essential nutrients is amino acids. Foundational or essential nutrients is amino acids. There's 9 of them. If you eat 4 ounces of meat, you're getting all 9. The problem is you're likely not building the 7 conditional from the 9, because they all get sucked up because you're chronically inflamed. And if you're not building collagen. Every single visible sign of aging has to do with collagen malnourishment. My hair gets gray, my skin gets wrinkled, my teeth fall out, my eyes go bad, my bones go bad because of collagen malnourishment. Again, cited paper, download it. I prove it in this paper, and happy to, give you chapter and verse on why that's the way that it is. So the last category, so that's category 2. And again, collagen. So where do we miss in category 1? Omega-3, 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 EPA and DHA. We all need to supplement with EPA and DHA. And you got to supplement. The food supply is not good enough right now. So Trumetics, we have all of these things. They're at a high level. We built them all to make it easy for you. So go to Trumetics. Check out our foundational nutrient package. We have another product called Essentials. It's amino acids, but foundational nutrients, those are your essential nutrients. But vitamins and minerals is the last category. And again, most of us miss here with B and C vitamins. So if you just play the AI game, what happens to me if I am malnourished in B and C vitamins, I am malnourished in collagen, and I overconsume omega-6 and am malnourished in omega-3 fats? You're going to see everything that's wrong with us right now. You're going to see obesity. You're going to see type 2 diabetes. You're going to see autoimmunes. You're going to see weak barriers, lots of infection, cancers, all that kind of stuff, right? That doesn't happen with a bright bulb. Okay? That's what I'm telling you. Okay? That doesn't happen with a bright bulb. Can you beat cancer with a dim bulb? No, probably not. Can you beat cancer with a bright bulb? You likely will never get it. But yeah, absolutely, you beat cancer with a bright bulb. Part of chemotherapy doesn't cure cancer. It doesn't have any ability to kill cancer. Chemotherapy, in this omega-6 over omega-3 situation, all of us are on fire in our immune system. It's really hard for our immune system to figure out what's going on. What does chemotherapy do? Calms down the immune system. And then you go, gee, I have cancer. I better go kill it. And you kill the cancer. Pharma doesn't kill the cancer. Chemotherapy doesn't kill the cancer. Chemotherapy just suppresses your immune system long enough for it to figure out you have cancer and then go kill it. And again, without oil and gas, you're not going to be as efficient as you would be with oil and gas. The cool thing about how God made us is if we don't have the oil and gas to do something, we'll go rob less critical areas for oil and gas. So why do we age? Robbery! We're robbing cosmetic areas for more critical brain health, heart health, and all that, more critical areas. Why do you get prostate? Why do women have pelvic floor issues? Robbery. You're robbing those areas of critical elements because you don't need them. We don't need to look good, and we don't need to reproduce to stay alive, right? So that's where you rob. And again, that's what happens. Okay, so super important in this whole scenario, is again this notion of electron that's attached to a fat. Well, you got to break down the fat, you got to strip everything away to get to that electron. Where and how does that happen? Well, the first stage of that is your gut barrier. If you can't absorb iron or B12 or B9, which happens in a lot of infections, that's the first thing that they do is wreck our ability to absorb those things, then again, it's really hard to begin to change you. It's really hard to change your situation over to get rid of that infection because you need iron and B9 and B12 in order to fight infections, which is a great strategy if you're a parasite or a pathogen, not such a great strategy for us. But there's always ways to beat these guys, let's say these infections. But anyway, we need a healthy gut barrier, a gut biome, and a gut barrier. How do you build a healthy gut barrier? Essential nutrients. Again, collagen is critical. Amino acids are critical to building a gut barrier. We turn over 5 to 10 grams of collagen every day just in our linings, just in how we protect ourselves from the outside. Where are you getting 5 or 10 grams of collagen? If you're not getting it, you're robbing it from somewhere in order to stay alive. So you get the criticality of this, I'm sure. So mucosal, again, your linings are really important. Your linings are what produce mucus, and your linings are also what produce that pH gradient that guards you from bacteria, viruses, funguses, all the crap, let's say, that's trying to get in us and decompose us. And again, they can only get in us and decompose us, just like that dead squirrel by the side of the road, if our switch is dim enough, okay? So infection is a big function of dimness because it's the way that the world works. And we're not going to have dead bodies laying around everywhere. So those dead bodies are going to be decomposed when a certain level of dimness is reached. That can happen inside of you. That can happen in your gut. You can have areas of your body that fall below that line, that begin to call in these decomposing bacteria, that literally begin to say, I'm dying, come decompose me. And we can have those situations in different areas in our body at any given time if we don't understand this, okay? So let's go in here about kind of what we can do. So what can we do about this therapeutically? Can we measure this? Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to measure this. And really you can use, standard diagnostic tests to measure this. So, just a blood test showing, a lot of white blood cells and low red blood cells would be enough to say, oh, this person's infected with something, right? So there's a lot of ways to get signals of what's going on here. And that's something that we're doing in our whole neighborly wellness clinic and our True Medic system is begin to talk about health signals. And then are those signals supported or not supported? And again, so if we're having infection signals, we're beginning to see things where these barriers are beginning to fail because of a lack of essential nutrients. There's a whole staging. And again, there'll be another white paper up on stages of barrier failure that's really, really important to consider in this whole model. Because again, as our border wall falls, what happens? Well, we're going to get invaded by all these bacteria that want to come in and decompose us. Again, how do we keep that from happening? We brighten up, we build a strong border wall, and then there's always ways to go in naturally and pick off any invaders. But that is basically our system of health. That is how we're trying to help you with what we know. Okay, so what can you do therapeutically if you think that this is going on, or you just want to be preventative, or let's say you have a loved one that has cancer or some serious problem? Again, it doesn't really matter. Everyone can climb out of the toilet. All right, we're all in the toilet right now. All of us are in the toilet. We can all climb out of the toilet just by doing this. So first thing is restoring essential nutrients. Again, without oil and gas, you're going to have a bad result. You're not going to get down the road the way that you should get down the road. So we got to restore oil and gas. That's a non-negotiable first starter. Now, the other thing about this is, again, the food supply is not good enough right now for you to get all your essential nutrients. Maybe if you got a calculator, you're willing to eat a room full of greens every day, Yeah, maybe a root vegetable. So maybe you might get there, but it's easier and more complete to supplement. So that's why in True Medics, we have an omega-3 supplement because we know that that's the deficiency. We have a collagen and stomach acid solution that's called GI Rebuild, that because we know that that's a deficiency in basically amino acids and collagen. And then we have a multivitamin product. By the way, I'll save you a lot of money on my multivitamin product. So if you're taking vitamins now, the way that vitamins are sold is you'll have to go out and buy an A, you'll have to buy a B, and even it could be a B12, a B1, a B2, a B3, a B5, a B6, a B7, B12, or a C, a D, and all these are broken out and separated, separate things for magnesium, separate things for manganese, separate things for iron. So you don't need that much of that stuff. It's really easy to put all that together. So that's what we did in our vitamins. So if you're taking our omega-3 from True Medics, if you're taking our GI Rebuild, and you're taking our multivitamin, you are restoring your essential nutrients. You don't have to do anything else, okay? And it matters what you eat. If you eat a bunch of sugar, that's going to increase inflammation. If you eat a bunch of carbohydrates, that's going to increase bloating and inflammation. So it matters what you eat, but it doesn't matter as far as essential nutrients. So we can check that box off. And that is so important because, again, how am I going to help you as a clinician, as a practitioner, if you don't have your oil and gas? You're not going to have the ability to repair yourself. And just giving you, everybody's the same here. Every cell will do the same thing when it's properly stimulated. And cells get wonky and whack out because they don't have essential nutrients. And when they don't have essential nutrients, they get infected. Okay. So repairing membranes, I know I beat this home. I know I say this in every single podcast, but again, it's so important. And, I just can't overemphasize it enough. Without oil and gas, you're going to have a bad result. And none of us know this for some reason. If you go ask a dietitian, what are your essential nutrients? They're going to give you they're going to fumble around with vitamins and they're going to give you the deer in the headlight look because they don't know. The PhDs that taught them don't know. It's insanity. It's absolute insanity. Naked and afraid, they poke themselves in the eyeballs, right? So that's where most of us have been at. All right, so repairing membranes and barrier systems. Again, this is how we get better. How do we repair membranes? Omega-3, okay? DHA and EPA. And some really, really weighty people in science have also said that same thing. So EPA and DHA is how we begin to repair and rebuild our barriers, our border wall, the thing that defends us from the outside of us. Okay. So again, infection and malnutrition are a big problem. Well, how do we keep from getting infected? Build a border wall. How do we build a border wall? Essential nutrients, which is also part of our other problem. So restoring essential nutrients gives us luminosity, gives us brightness, allows us to defend ourselves, also builds a strong border wall that you've got to have in order to be healthy. So the next thing that we need to do therapeutically is reducing pathogen burden strategically. So how do you know if you're infected? Well, again, symptoms are a way to know. So if you have gas, bloating, if you burp up stomach acid like GERD or gastric upset, you're infected. Okay. If you have bloating, you're infected. If you have things that aren't normal, like, my side hurts over here every time after I eat, or my back hurts or whatever, those are signs. Now, in the modern medical system, let's say, we're taught to ignore those. Your doctor does. So why shouldn't we? We're taught to ignore those. We don't do that in our system. Those are important feedback mechanisms. Those are very important feedback mechanisms, and those are important signals that are telling you things. But most of all, they're telling you that you're likely infected. Okay. So we have some tools to look at infection. They're not diagnostic tools at Neighborly Wellness, but we can suggest diagnostic tools if you really want to prove it to yourself that you're infected. But we've got a great first line system to kind of get, let's say, infection indications and what you might be infected with. that can always be proved with deeper diagnostics, but it's a great first step tool. So if you're in Edmond or in Oklahoma, come by Neighborly Wellness and let's scan you and see where you're at as far as pathogen burden. But if you've had a recent blood test, so if you have high white blood cells, and I don't mean out of range high, I just mean in the range high, you're infected. If you have, let's say, percentage of differentiation in your blood cells, so if you have the neutrophil, eosinophil stuff, percentages on your blood test, that's a great way to see what your body thinks you're infected with, because those are white blood cells that are reacting to infections, and they're differentiating to try to kill a bacteria, to try to kill a parasite, to try to kill a virus, to try to kill a fungus. And you can kind of tell from how they're differentiating out what might be going on. But again, if you have a little bit, and I mean just in range, but a little bit higher than, let's say, that middle line in white blood cells, you're likely infected with something, okay? So if you pull out a blood, and again, if you want to have a consult, call us, set it up. I'll teach you how to do this. So the last thing is really reestablishing redox balance and electron flow. So we've all heard of, or likely you've heard of, this concept of redox. So it's reduction, oxidation, and that's how, let's say, if I'm moving an electron from one structure, it might be a molecule, it might be an atom, it might be an ion, but if I'm moving a molecule from one structure to another, then I'm oxidizing this one and reducing this one. So, and that's kind of what happens inside of your body. Now, if that electron leaks between this process, that causes oxidative stress, because you're going to have oxygen pick that guy up, and he's going to make some likely horribly reactive intermediary that's not good for you. Okay. So we want a real smooth flow of electrons all the way from the fats that we eat, and there are some in carbohydrates, just not as many, but all the way from the things that we eat into those mitochondria. Okay. So we want that to be a very tight, very firm, very sturdy pipeline. We don't want a bunch of leakage coming out of that pipeline. Right now, we've got a bunch of leakage. Okay. All of us have a bunch of leakage, but you can't create this pipeline, and you can't create a situation without leakage without essential nutrients. And again, infection is going to cause leakage. That's part of the strategy. If I can get your body to really, let's say, have a lot of oxidative stress in an area, then your immune system is going to be more concerned with that than me eating on you as a pathogen, right? So it's a strategy. If I can get you lit up over here, you're going to kind of ignore that I'm hiding in a cave over in the other way. So basically, this unified therapeutic model that we're pushing, and this is what we're doing now, this works. I mean, this has been working for people in our universe and network for about 2 years. And we're seeing people recover from all kinds of, let's say, unrecoverable things. And that's about, I won't make any claims. But, we're seeing some really cool stuff happen in our model. Why? This is not new. We're just standing on science and pulling together science in a little different way than it's ever been done before. So in our unified therapeutic model, the first thing that we have to do is restore essential nutrients. And we have to begin that membrane repair and barrier repair. How are you going to defend yourself without a border wall? So we got to build that border wall. Then we got to reduce the pathogens. And we can most of the time reduce pathogens at the same time that we're building those borders. So this is something that can be done at the same time. And then lastly, what we want to see is that firm, tight pipeline of electron flow. We don't want to see a lot of leakage. We don't want to see a lot of oxidative stress. And again, these things can be measured, right? So there's a way to measure you as far as your luminosity, as far as where the brightness switch is. And I've written some white papers on that. So we'll get some white papers up. So that's kind of the idea, boys and girls. That's kind of what we're after, is understanding that life isn't on or off. I'm not like alive now and dead now. I'm somewhere along a continuum of brightness. And I want to be as bright as I possibly can, because if I'm as bright as I possibly can be, I'm going to defend myself. I'm not going to get infected. I'm not going to get sick. I'm going to live longer. I'm going to live happier. I'm going to live more robust. And that's what we all want, isn't it? I mean, that's what we all want. We want to live healthy And we want this to be in our control. And that's another thing that's nice about this is, you control whether you eat your essential nutrients. And again, if I can educate you, you will control how infected you get and your ability to control your own infection. So we will leave it there for today for this exciting episode of Chip Talks Health. We'll continue to do these smaller segments because it's just we've got a lot to get out there, a lot of information, a lot of education. Anyway, we'll see you guys next time back on another exciting episode of Chip Talks Health.